Welcome to Untamed Blossoms, the podcast where we celebrate the untamed journey of womanhood. Here, we tell the stories of incredible women who have embraced their authenticity, inspiring others to do the same.
From entrepreneurs to artists, activists to adventurers, we share triumphs, challenges, and the beauty of self-discovery. These are the stories of women blazing their own trails, breaking free, and blooming unapologetically.
Join us to connect, be inspired, and celebrate the power of women's stories. Together, let's rewrite the rules and embrace our wildness.
Welcome to Untamed Blossoms. I'm your host, Amanda Riley.
And I'm Christy Riley. Welcome to the show, everybody.
I'm glad I'm able to go back to my standard caffeinated amount.
Are you excited about that?
I am. It's been a long
Couple of weeks. Yeah.
Been about 30 days. And I feel like now I'm fine. I'm back with my caffeine and I feel good about it.
Yeah.
My eye is twitching though, so.
Which is definitely the amount of caffeine probably you've had. You're not used to.
Right.
Maybe. Not that you've had an excessive amount because you have today, but I'm just not used to it.
Half of my normal amount of pre-workout this morning. Right. I've been halving that.
Right.
And then 2 cups of coffee. That's like nothing.
Through the second.
No. And it's Capri Sun, which was so good. I was at a thrift store yesterday and I found the coolest 90s cartoon character shirt.
That's awesome.
I can't wait to wear it.
I can't wait for you to wear it.
I'm going to wash it tonight.
It's going to be the greatest realtor outfit of all time.
Jim.
Or Jim.
Probably Jim. And I found a sweet Michael Myers shirt too.
Oh.
Yeah.
You love horror films.
I do.
Yeah.
And people were like, oh, I thought you don't like horror films that can be real life. Okay. Michael Myers is supernatural, obviously. And like, he never has to run to kill people.
Right.
Which I think is something we can all aspire.
Right.
You know, you don't need cardio to be dangerous. And that's a motto I live by.
We hate running.
Ugh.
Yuck.
I love walking. I love hiking.
Yes.
I used to run half marathons all the time. Isn't that wild to think about? You came to one once.
I did. It's painful.
Yeah, I got plantar fasciitis afterwards.
It was painful to watch. I was like, definitely not. Although I was like, there's a part of me that's like, definitely not. And a part of me that's so like, I should aspire to do what she's doing. What a feat. And then I was like, definitely not. And then you watch people collapse and vomit. And,
yeah. I only did a half marathon though. People are out here doing whole ass marathons.
Listen, those big, the ones that do like hundreds of miles and dumb shit like that.
Ultra marathons. Oh, I think it's so cool. The thing what's crazy is it goes back to this almost always. Every body is different.
Yeah.
And so some people are just made for that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely
this
not.
Irish, heritage lassie inside of me is like, no. You stay strong so we can tend to the farm.
Yeah. Unless I'm being chased. No,
yeah.
Thank you.
No.
Or if I'm playing a sport, there's some running in pickleball or some sport I was running, but not. I'm not a track girl. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was always an infielder.
Yeah. And you did
strong on the infield.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah. You were doing the strong sports.
Yeah. Shot put, discus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If I had a child, I would be a nightmare because I would be the track coach, throwing coach.
Right.
And I would force my child into playing infield.
Yeah. Because you loved it so much.
I loved it.
Yeah.
It's like the happiest of memories for me.
Yeah. But if you were doing it and exposed them early, they'd probably want to. You would. Because mom.
Either way.
You know what I mean?
Either way, get them into the gym early.
Let's go.
I saw some, younger teenagers working out recently sometimes I go on the weekend just to walk and read my Kindle. I'm like, it's so cool. I wish I had access to like a gym like that.
Yeah.
At that age to be able just to go in and feel confident about lifting and all of that.
Right. Were they boys or girls?
They were girls.
Yeah. Good for them.
See lots of boys there, especially in the summertime. I think it's like a sport.
They started in football pretty early, so they start going to I think boys get exposed to it way more. But I will say that both of Stan's girls, my bonus girls, have had weightlifting as part of their like soccer, Haley had it during soccer season. It was part of their conditioning. So they would go to the weight room and lift weights, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, I think that's awesome.
And the same thing with track. The track girls are going to the gym as part of their conditioning before track season starts. So it was like an extra add-on, which I don't remember any of that when we were in school. Like, it's not a thing.
Well, like we did conditioning and stuff, and like depending on what your
right. But did you go to the gym and lift weights?
We had a gym like that was for the athletes outside of like the actual gym.
Right.
And we did weight training. Now, if you were a runner, you might have only done it like a couple of days a week.
Right.
But the rowers and stuff, we did it every time.
Yeah.
And they would be like, okay, go out and run. And we would be like, okay, we'll go walk. The moment our coach also did pole vault and long jump, he like did all like the fitness.
Yeah.
The moment he was out of sight, we were like, walking. Anyone got a snack? And I cherish those days.
Anyone got a snack?
Anyone have a snack?
It is snack time. I will say that Kirsten probably is also part of that crew. Although she's really running. She's really trying hard. She's really trying hard to get her times right. She was really, things that she used to complain about walking, and now she's running track, which is mind blowing. And
cross country too, right?
And doing cross country because she wanted to stay in shape. She liked it so much, and it was just one of those surprise sports where you're like, and she let her as if her times were good enough in cross country that she let her this freshman year. She really likes it now. Now she's like, oh, there's prizes involved. I'm going to work harder.
And then the Riley blood. You give me a prize when I realized.
She's all about the prizes.
I tried out for volleyball every year. I tried out for basketball. I mean, I tried out.
Right.
I desperately wanted to be a sports girly.
Yeah.
Just where this body was set up, it never really worked out. But when I did track and realized I could let her and I could win ribbons and shit, I was like, sign me up.
That's where she's
indoor, outdoor, everything.
Yeah. That's the way she is with her horse and now with. So she's all in. And so she actually, the plan was for her and her buddy who both run track. They were going to run during spring break every day on the beach. And I was like, okay. They did one time. They went one time. Day 2, the shoes full of sand stayed on the porch until we left the following week.
Now that is, I would say, a common experience of we will work out on vacation. One of the realtors I work with, I love her. She's a spirit animal, and she's also likes to work out a lot. She's probably the only person I know that actually does actually work out on vacation, like seriously.
Wow.
I'm like, you go, girl.
Yeah.
I walk on the beach. That's about it.
Yeah, we did. We walked on the beach and then did squats and push-ups on the beach. That was the extent, which I felt good. I got sore. We did so many squats in my sore, so I felt accomplished about that. The fact that I got my legs sore on vacation,
that's good.
It's a win.
My legs are still killing me from last week when we started lifting again.
Oh gosh. Plus we did them again this morning.
The way I did set up this workout plan is every day.
I
feel like involved.
I've noticed. Thanks.
Sorry,
not sorry.
All right. Well, our guest today talking financial literacy. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, I'm excited to have her on. Stan and I have been over the last 6 months really looking at all of our finances, what's serving us, what's not, whether it's in the business or personally. Where's our spending going? Are we okay with it? Where are we overlapping? I think when you have two very independent people that get together over the years, and he has subscriptions to things and I have, and we did the Rocket Money thing to try to figure out where we're overlapping.
Yeah.
And even that process was a lot to get us all uploaded, and then his Apple card wouldn't transition over. You had to upload statements. And so I'm like, we're getting rid of that card. I'm just putting you on my credit card, so that we can actually see what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I just think it's really important for women, especially, to really understand. And we're not getting taught about money in school, in high school. Mm-hmm. So I feel like young kids are coming out not really very educated. I feel I definitely did not know anything about money coming out of high school, college. I went to nursing school, talked about nothing about money. So I do think it's something that unless you're interested in it, you go sometimes you're half your adult life not understanding how money works in our country, how do you invest it, unless it's the normal vanilla 401ks and things that your employer offers that not everybody has access to.
And I will say not only that, but for the most part, it's privileged white men who teach other people about money. Yeah. And that's something that has kept me an avoidant behavior for so long. As I would read about Dave Ramsey and his process, all this stuff, I'm like, well, it must be nice to be like, the advice he gives isn't realistic for most people, especially women, especially single women, especially single parent women. Like, it's just not always feasible. It's not always helpful. So I'm really, really excited. I know our guest Becca, she had a funny reel about, she was like, don't eat, save your money. And then she's like, April Fools. But that's so much of the advice you get. It's like, well, did you buy a coffee this week? And it's like, bitch, I have $120,000 student loans. This coffee isn't making a break in me. Give me something realistic. You know what I mean? So I'm excited to hear from a woman in this space and hear what she's done to help other people.
I agree. Can't wait.
Well, hello, Becca. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Becca. We found you online, I think. I think we have a mutual friend and somebody else that we've interviewed, maybe, right?
Yes, that is how I found you guys.
Nice. Oh, awesome. Nice. Perfect. And I think it's cool that the social media, you know, sometimes it gets a bad rap, but it connects people from far and wide, which is really cool. Where are you located currently? Yeah. Where are you from? Right.
I'm in Denver, Colorado.
That's what we thought. Okay. Denver, Colorado, which is great. I love it there, by the way. Love it.
Well, it's sunny there a lot, right? That's what I've heard.
It's sunny there here all the time, like 300 days a year at least.
Yeah, we're in Ohio, so feel sorry for us. We're at like 150 days a year of sunshine or something like that. It's 160. It's not a lot. We have a lot of overcast days. Yeah. So we're so
originally from the East Coast. So I guess that.
So you understand the Midwestern East Coast dilemma.
Yeah.
So where were you from originally then?
New Jersey.
New Jersey. Yeah.
New Jersey, girl. How long were you there?
I was there until like I did 1 year after college, and then I guess I was 23 when I moved to California, and then a few years later came to Denver.
Awesome. Wow. So tell us a little bit about you. Get to start as early as you'd like to. Tell us a little bit about Becca.
Yeah, absolutely. So like we said, I am from New Jersey, and I did going through high school there. I was in the band, and that led me to going to school for music, actually for college. And I went to school to be a music educator, which I was for a handful of years. But I graduated with like $50,000 of student debt. And I was trying to be a teacher, like just outside of New York City with, like I said, so much student debt and a teacher's salary. And it was like, how do these pieces all fit together? That's when I started digging into finance, and things got easier, like as I learned. And that's when I was like, man, everybody should know this. And then the flip kind of just switched right there. And then I moved into teaching personal finance.
Amazing. We were just talking about that in your intro, as just what you learn in school, which is very little about finance. And then you get this pressure to go to college, and you're like, cool. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to make millions of dollars afterwards. And then you don't. And then now you have hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some people, I had $120,000 of student loan debt, and you just don't really know what to do or where to go, or the advice that you're getting is from like Dave Ramsey. The advice that you would get from reading some of these books from old white men just were not very helpful. So is that something that you found to be true? Like when you started your journey around understanding financials?
Yes, 100%. Yes. And like both like the advice is bad and like the style of advice was not it for me. I was like, I do not want to be yelled at. I want to be like, somebody hold my hand and tell me I'm doing a good job, and then teach me how to do an even better job. And so that's like, yeah, it was, I wanted the answers, but I didn't love the form the answers were like being wrapped up and given to me in.
Yeah. And there's a lot of like guilt and shame coded messages also of like, oh, you're broke, but you bought a coffee today. It's like, yeah, Dave, I do need some caffeine as I'm working my 4 jobs to make ends meet. So lay off,
Right. It's
Trigger
not
for me.
it's not gonna be it's a trigger for me. My kids actually I have adult children, Becca, and my 2 twin daughters got into the Dave Ramsey program pretty heavily. And and I was like, this seems like weird advice. But they're really like militant, right? So if you give them a format, they're like, okay, and they'll be all in, right? And so they were successful in it, in that they were paying off debt, but I do feel like it created a lot of anxiety around finances because of the messaging, right? And that carries with them today. That part of it is like, and everybody who's really financially wealthy out there is like, that's not the road to wealth. You can't be afraid of debt if you're going to get wealthy, right? Like, so it's the debt isn't always terrible. It's just is. And there's ways around all that. And there's ways to work with it to your benefit, and trying to, I want to use the words reprogram, because that's kind of what's happening, is trying to help them with not being so financially like shut down. Like literally I've watched them become super anxious about their finances if it doesn't fall into the criteria. And then I have to remind them, like, okay, but you took your emergency fund because you had an emergency at the house, and so using his tech, like, right. And it's a reprogramming, and they had an emergency at the house. Okay, you don't have that in the account now because the account was used for what he said was the purpose of it. But now you're anxious that you don't have the money in that account. Like, it created so much anxiety around it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that as we work through some of this today, and how that could be a different approach.
Yeah. And I totally relate, because I found myself that way too. I didn't fall too deep into the Dave Ramsey thing. I think, like, for a lot of people, and myself included, like, I heard his advice. I heard it once and was like, okay, there's some merit to it. And then I pivoted to find some other people that I resonated with a little bit more strongly. And so, one for me was like choose FI, like choose financial independence. That really, like, I would say it was not in their branding and messaging to really instill the stress and anxiety around it, but it was in my programming to have that stress and anxiety around it. And so when I was like first out of college, I was paying thousands of dollars a month to my student loans, which felt amazing, but it was because I was spending literally $0 on things that weren't essentials. And even the essentials, I was like, how can I make this as cheap as possible? Like, going to the grocery store twice a week to get the right coupons at the right times. Like, I was doing everything I could to save pennies, and maybe I learned some positive lessons there, but I for sure went a little too hard, and it's taken years to find a more like happy medium where I am progressing towards my financial goals, and I'm living my life, and I'm buying a coffee if I want to.
Right.
And how did you pivot to kind of creating your own thing? So did you go back to school for that, or tell us about that process?
Yes. So I was considering leaving teaching. After a few years, it was amazing in some ways, and it wasn't the best fit of me being in a classroom. So I was thinking about leaving teaching in the public school sense, but I have always felt like a teacher, being the big sister and telling her, sit down, we're doing school now, that kind of thing. And so I wanted some place where I could still help and teach. And so I found this company called The Financial Gym, and they were hiring financial coaches. And I was like, this feels like the perfect fit. I am into finance and I like being a teacher. So I became a financial coach. I stayed with them for a couple years. And then after that, it was time to do it on my own. And the reason I kind of pivoted then from that was an amazing like starting place to become a financial coach, but it was very focused on numbers. And now I focus a lot more on mindset. Like we're talking about, like, how do you feel okay about going out to get a coffee and paying off your debt? And so focusing less on the numbers and more on everything else that's going on behind the math, which is how I came to my brand name, Money Beyond Math.
Tell us a little bit about your program then.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, stepping on to being my own boss was a very weird change, but it was exciting. And so, yeah, I got started, doing the things they tell you to do when you're starting your own business, a website, a social media, all that good stuff. And yeah, it's been going well. The people I'm trying to reach is, like women who are finding like, "Ugh, I wish somebody told me how to do this with my money, whether it's pay down debt, whether it's save for retirement, learn how to invest, all those things." I'm just kind of there to be like a friend for your finances.
And how does your program different from, let's say, the Dave Ramseys of the world?
Yeah, so I meet with my clients twice a month, one-on-one, and it is, I would say, a very like positive coaching experience. We go over like what worked, what didn't, and how do we find real solutions to the things that were challenges. And so I'm working with people really, really close, both like in their finances and in their habits to slowly make positive changes.
So they come to you and they say, "I really," I'm assuming that people are seeking you out because I don't want to say they're in trouble, but maybe finances are not great, right? They find themselves in a lot of debt and they're like, "I need somebody to help me figure this out." Or are you finding that your clients are more like, "Hey, I just don't understand any of this and I need you to help me"?
Yeah, there's definitely two buckets. There's like, I've kind of hit rock bottom and I'm done dealing with this. I just need somebody's help. Which is like a point that many of us get to. And then if you do find yourself at that point, like you're usually super ready for change. So you actually make for a great coaching client because you're ready, like, okay, I'll do whatever you say. So those are about half of my clients. The other half are maybe some like positive change has happened and they don't know how to like capitalize on it. Like, I just got a new job. That's a really common one. Or I just got married. How do we commingle our finances? Or we're planning to have a baby. So these like kind of like life points where makes you consider like, do I have all these pieces in line? And often money is the one that feels a little out of whack. And sometimes those life changes make us notice that.
Yeah, totally. And I'm just going to use myself as an example here. So I think it's interesting because when you grow up with parents who you don't talk about money, like no one looks at dad's paycheck, you don't talk about money, but you understand that financially things aren't great, right? And you're told no a lot and all of those things. And you get to college. Again, this is my own story. But I think a lot of other people's as well. You go to college and the year's 2004, you realize you can get a credit card. And so not only are you going into school knowing you're taking out a lot of loans, but having no idea what that really means. Then you need money to live and you have credit cards. And I think that origin story, if you will, of the financial goblin starts there and then can just escalate throughout life. And you want to continue on this train ride that you've been on. And there comes a time where you have to get off that train. And the hardest part about that, I feel like, is looking your finances in the face, knowing that you did that and being like, oh my God, like I have put myself in this situation and I've been avoiding it for so long. And now I have to look at it. What is your advice for those people who have just maybe not gotten off that train and are terrified to really sit down and take a good hard look at where they are financially?
Yeah, I think it actually circles back to like part of our earlier conversation in that like you did the best you could with the tools you had at the time. And so any shame that may come with looking at your finances, finding a way to let go of that. And that can be really hard. Some tips I have for like learning to let go of it. You're not the only one. We don't talk about credit card debt often out loud, and so it might feel like you're the only one, but I promise you, you are not. Most Americans are in the same situation. So realizing that, realizing you were doing the best you could, like yes, you had to put food on the table. You had to like get through life, and so credit card debt sometimes comes with that, or just any kind of debt. So those kind of things, and then really just like believing that you can make the change. Those like things kind of combine to me and to the clients I've helped, kind of release that shame. And I think that's the first step to looking at your finances, because you're not going to look if it's going to feel icky. So you have to figure out how to make it not feel icky.
Yeah. I guess, is there an overall theme that you see, or something that big highlighted things that you see that maybe are the most common things that you have to tackle, as far as the kind of debt, or the way, the ways of overcoming that? Because a lot of that is, you can get into a lot of things about spending, shopaholics, credit card debt can be a whole bunch of things, right? It may not be just as easy as I went to college and I had to take all these loans to get my college degree, and now I don't make enough money to pay that back. That's predatory in of itself, in my opinion. We can go, that's a whole subject that I like to touch on and hear your thoughts. I know my experience with it, but do you have common big picture themes that you see a lot of?
Yeah, in like accumulating debt.
Yeah, or just the struggles that people have.
Yeah, I think some of the big picture themes are that like people know maybe what they need to do for change to improve their finances, but they're not exactly sure like how to do it. Like, okay, I know I need to pay off this debt, but how do I find $50 a month to go towards it? And so having somebody else that's not in your daily life, like look at your scenario and be like, I think these are the places that it's leaking, because you're almost too close to your own finances. It doesn't feel like anything can change. So somebody just like having another set of eyes is a big reason people come to me. Similarly, like in that vein, having accountability. Finances have been hush hush for so long, and there's a reason for that. It's easier to keep us in these tough situations when we're not talking to our friends, our family, any resources we may have. And so having accountability, but also just somebody to talk about your finances with, is a game changer. Like, so many clients have told me the first month of working with me is the most they've ever thought about their money, because they knew they were going to be meeting with me in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and they were going to have to talk about like, oh, why did I spend $100 here when I said I was going to save it? So having that extra set of eyes is one big reason. Having somebody to talk to is another big reason. Sometimes people tell me it's the first time they've said any of this out loud, like, I have credit card debt. I've never told anyone. So those are big things. And then like as far as the finances go, the big themes of course are like paying down debt, learning how to save that like first emergency fund, and then learning how to invest are kind of the big financial themes.
What are your biggest investment advice for women? Is it different from men usually, or is this just your approach is more geared towards women because of the approach? It's a more gentle kind of, if you want, feminine. We're softer and all the things, right? It's not so harsh. Or do you feel like the actual advice is different?
Yeah, so generally, I actually feel like most of the advice is
Okay.
similar, but it's not the exact same. So things like, we have to invest with a slightly different timeline, because so many women outlive their husbands or divorce, or, for whatever reason. There's a statistic, I wish I knew the exact number of, a very, very large percentage of women are going to be living alone in the last handful of years. And so, like, just that alone changes how we're going to invest. We have to be really strategic with like making it last, but the foundation of investing doesn't really change. So it's things that we might tweak, but not necessarily change. And then really just driving into like education. I think a lot of women have been kept out of conversations where maybe you could have learned a little bit of investing just talking to friends. That doesn't necessarily happen in a lot of spaces that women are in. And so breaking through that idea that this is hard or that you won't be able to do it or that you won't be able to learn how to do it, changing that mindset first and then going into the education.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely true too. I can't tell you any circles where we sit and talk about, so what did you invest in this week? But it is a very common in the circles of men, right? To talk about, well, I did this with my Bitcoin and I did this. So did you look at this person? And it is a more masculine themed thing. I would love to hear both of your inputs as to why we believe that is. You know, is it just historically that men have been in those circles and not women?
Well, I think historically men have been in charge of financials.
Yeah.
Whether the women do the work behind the scenes or not, and keeping the checkbook or keeping the bills paid, whatever that looks like. But men, I think historically have been the breadwinners, and financially they've been able to make the risk decisions.
Right.
Where we make historically the grocery budget. You know what I'm saying? I feel like
they manage the household monies, but
the
not
budget
the incoming.
versus the like, how do we prepare for our future? I feel like that has always been a more masculine theme. And again, I feel so triggered during this whole conversation today because of my upbringing around money, but then also my husband's very into stocks and all of these things. And I literally want to jump out a window whenever he talks about it, because he talks about it in a way that I should just know what the hell he's saying to me. And I'm like, I literally have no clue what you're talking about right now. And I think you said it great earlier, is like, there's no approach of like educating and like sitting down talking about it. No, but you should get the stock. Okay, but why? What does that even mean? There's like Robinhood. There's like all these other like apps that you can use. There's 401ks you can manipulate, but no one sits down to have a meaningful educational conversation. It's just a advice conversation. That's what I think the difference is. So I don't know how you feel about that, Becca, but
yeah, I feel super similarly. And just like even down to the messaging around money, like a lot of times messaging around money for women is like how to spend less, how to spend less on these like frivolous things, which is crazy because then for men, the messaging is how to make more, how to grow your wealth. And then even the things they spend on are not seen as frivolous, despite being like, if you think about it, similar, like watches for men are great investments, but bags for women are a waste of money. And so it's that like messaging around these things that just like brings us up into money differently.
it's so
I think
frustrating.
that's so interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to think about, to put that on your forefront is two feminists sitting here that do our own thing, right? Like, it's an interesting thought process, and that's in some ways men are more is geared, like their DNA is to achieve, right? To get, to go, to do, to obtain. And women are just not as geared towards that. Not that we can't, but it's not necessarily our driving force. And does that necessarily lead them into that realm versus women into that realm? Not that there aren't women in that realm, but historically is what I'm speaking to, that we just avoid it. I find it disinteresting.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't interest me, you know, like money interests me and ways to invest it. But when I get into the stock market, I'm like, somebody shoot me in the face.
Yeah.
I do, like, it just really doesn't interest me. Like, it's not, and I'm glad there's people out there like you, but I can't, if I'm not interested in it, and I feel like you probably believe that, feel the same way, is that it's just hard to get into that world and find yourself, like to take the deep dive that you did and take the classes and re-educate yourself, and to the point that you want to teach other women to do it is fantastic. But the topic itself, you know, I find we both are like, we love information, but it's not a topic that I've ever been like, I can't wait. And I don't know how to get over that hurdle, but I do find that I still am the manager of the household finances. I'm still in that place where I'm looking at our personal investments and our personal, like he's handling more of the business side of it and I'm handling the personal side of it. This is what we're going to do with our income. This is how we're diversifying. This is how we're, so I'm in it and I'm doing it, but I don't find it particularly interesting to do. And I don't know how to get over that hurdle. And maybe it's just that's why maybe women aren't so much in this, you know, in the same conversations, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, and the great thing is, and like what I would tell a client is that the amazing news, you actually probably don't need to get over that hurdle.
Thank
A
God.
lot of this, especially when it comes to investing, has been complicated, at least like outward facing. It's complicated, right? They have like various terms that seem so hard. And the best news that I have learned is that you don't need to know the ins and outs of every single thing in the stock market if you understand the basics. And so if it's not your thing, no
Yeah.
worries. We can just get you to the basic understanding and feeling good about an investment strategy that works for you, which could be explained in, I promise, like 10, 20 minutes. And if you feel like you understand that, I bet the whole stock market would feel more comfortable and you still wouldn't have to go in deeper. But
Yeah.
yeah, basically, like you don't need to get over the hurdle to invest, which is great
And
news.
how do you, or what's your approach, I guess, to talking with couples, right? I think we all know financials are one of the most stressful things that happen in relationships. And when you get married, deciding to keep finances separate or coming together is a big decision. So can you talk to us about some advice that you normally give or just strategy that you find helpful when people conjoin or decide not to conjoin their financials?
Yeah, and that's a big reason people do come to me because it's like nice to have a third party that is unemotionally involved in the finances. So that's a big reason. But yeah, I have some like big tips. The one of the biggest setups or the best setups that I like to see is the yours, mine, and ours concept of like a lot of the money is going to like collectively come together to tackle these like shared bills, but also shared goals. Often that's like where I tell people to have the money coming into as a shared or a joint checking account. But some of the money goes out and we get to do our own things without consulting our partner because we've allocated, I don't know, maybe it's $300 a month we each get that I can spend on whatever I want to spend on, and you can spend on whatever you want to spend on. And so it gives this like still we have autonomy with our money inside of this like joint, mostly joint setup.
Well, and joint legal binding agreement and contract, right? Like people forget that marriage is legally binding, jointed in every way, right? Unless you have signed a paper saying differently otherwise, right? And I think people don't, even if you want to keep it separated, if something happened, right? Like it's all combined anyway, really, regardless of whether you kept your finances separate. But I know people keep it separate for a lot of different reasons, right? And finding what's comfortable for your particular marriage, I think is real important. Where and yet still having feeling like you're combined in a way that you're sharing goals. I love that comment, and that there's an hours pile that not only is just paying the bills but also for joint goals, and I think that's really well said.
Yeah, I've had a lot of clients see a lot of success with it that like we come together first and then we still get to have some money on our own rather than like it all comes to ourselves first. And then I think I've seen sometimes where there's been like conflict of like, oh, well, you're not putting enough towards this goal that we say we share.
Right.
So it kind of flips that idea and I've seen it really work well.
Yeah. Also, this is tax season right now. Getting my taxes done right after this. Was it by
Yes.
design? No, but it worked out that way. And I think, going from someone who worked in corporate America, taxes were taken out, easy peasy, everything was cool. I've always had little side hustles here and there, but for the most part, the majority of my income was already taxed, easy. Well, I decided to change my whole life and now do not work in corporate America. And I'm doing my own thing and have various incomes from various different places and am now a full-time real estate consultant as well. So next year my taxes will be even crazier. So just curious what your advice may be or things that you have witnessed or people who do their own thing who are not taking the normal route and how to plan for taxes, how to make sure that you're feeling comfortable going in to your year. Like, I know just like making spreadsheets. I love spreadsheets. So I have lots of spreadsheets, but making a spreadsheet of tracking things I know is going to be important. But outside of that, I guess really like strategy wise, I have none. So just curious of what your thoughts are about that.
Yes, definitely. I made the same pivot, so I totally get it of like taxes are taken care of until all of a sudden they're not to end. So my handful of tips there is one, for most employees, like W-2 employees, taxes is a once a year event. The second you start working for yourself, you should probably, in most cases, be filing and paying rather, your quarterly taxes. And so all of a sudden, instead of a once a year event, it's a 4 times a year event. And that comes as a shock to most people, including myself. So starting to learn what quarterly taxes are. My second piece of advice is that this is when tax professionals genuinely like really provide value. And so I actually recommend most people in the first year or two that they are working for themselves, work with a tax professional. And if you're a do-it-yourself kind of person, like ask them questions along the way, like how are you doing this? What do I need to know? And then after a year or two of like learning this new tax setup, then you can take it on your own. And so that's the strategy I would recommend for most people.
I did Untamed Blossoms taxes this year because we really didn't have a ton of income or expenses yet. I'm going to put that out in the universe. And so I didn't want to pay a tax professional. So I just used, I guess I shouldn't say I didn't want to, but I did use TurboTax. And even that, I will tell you, was so confusing. I had to look so many things up and the law changes so frequently that the days of 20, 30, 40 years ago when I was coming out of high school and doing my own personal taxes and doing the 1040 that was literally 1 page long that you filled out your W-2 information and just sent it in, the days of that are fairly gone. Like even my young son, who is barely making any money, made like $13,000 last year, doing his tax return, it wasn't so simple. And the questions they're asking, figuring out what that was. And I was like, none of that applies to you, but I know they have to ask the questions. And just educating him through that process, these first couple of years as into adulthood, how many kids or parent just trying to figure that out or aren't filing their taxes or, whatever that looks like. But it has become, in my opinion, and maybe I'm just getting old, more complicated. Like a taxes doesn't seem so simple anymore. So just filing a simple tax return. There's so many other things that go into it and so many attachments and so many things that I'm like, I don't, I'm like, okay, the CPAs are doing it next year because we have other businesses. So I'm like, I'm going to lump in Untamed Blossoms next year with what they're doing because it's a flow through tax return, but it does get complicated, especially as a partnership, as to who brought what, who took what, what assets do we have? Like it does become fairly complicated if it's not something you do every day. Even answering the questions, I was like, what's that question mark? I don't even know what they're asking me. Like you're searching through the questions to make sure that you understand the question. So it's way more complicated to file a business tax return than you realize.
Yes. Yeah. And it falls into that category of things that we all wish they could have taught us and they didn't. And so, man, this seems to be the theme of the day, but if you're feeling like a lot of shame around not knowing how to file your taxes, it's not your fault. They never taught you, and it is complicated. And so that's, yeah, using a tax professional, or like, luckily, if you do have the time and energy, like the answers are out there on YouTube and on irs.gov, all these like decent resources, but there's a
Right.
lot. So,
No, as you're getting into
yeah,
it, as
it
you're
is.
getting into business, if this is your first time, does anybody know what a balance sheet is? Anyone? Anyone? Right? Like you don't know. And you're like, what? What's your balance sheet? That's literally a question on the tax form. Like, what is your current balance sheet? Right. And so I'm like, okay. And now I know what a balance sheet was because we've been in business for a long time now. But as a new person, if that, like what are you asking for? Like you would have to literally go and figure that out and do the math and what's in your bank account. There's a way to figure out your balance sheet, obviously, but it takes some knowing. And then there is shame in some ways around that. Like, I just wanted to start this little business because I want to teach people about their finance. And now I don't, and now I've got to do what with my taxes, and I have to do a balance sheet, and I have to keep a P&L, and I have to, right? That's profit and loss for the, like there's all of this lingo that comes with it that you weren't really anticipating as part of the, and not just your financial world, but let's say you want to sell art, right? Like and now I'm an artist and I want to sell my art. I don't know what all these things are from a financial standpoint, right? Well, even the terminology becomes foreign. And even on my 18-year-old's tax return, they're like, what assets do you have? And what liabilities do you have? And even the verbiage, right, is he's like, what are they asking me here? I have no idea what they're talking about. What does this mean for me? And so there's this constant interpretation on these forms that I think makes people shy away from it too. Let's talk about student loans. Can we pivot quickly and talk about student loans? Do you have, I will tell you what my experience was when my kids went to college. I know that Amanda has a different story too, but it's so predatory. It's so predatory. And I literally had to put the rest of my kids' student loans onto our mortgage to get out from under it because I couldn't pay it fast enough to get from underneath the interest. And I was making extra payments. This is a true story, you guys. Like, seriously, through the federal government student loan, Parent Plus loan, to be exact, is that if I made an extra payment, I was making all the normal payments they told me to make. I started with $75,000 in student loan. And by the time they graduated, I was making all the payments they told me to, I had $95,000 in student loans. Okay. This is how these student loans are compounding while these kids are in school. So it's not just the amount that you initially take. It's all the interest that compounds in the 4 years that you're there. And then I'm making all these extra payments as a parent. I'm making extra payments every month. I'm making extra money. Well, then in the fine print, which is why I had to take it and put it onto my mortgage, in the fine print, it said that if you made an extra payment during the first 10 days from your initial payment due, that extra payment went towards interest.
Goodness.
That is some crazy predatory horseshit that I'm like, what? And I'm like, so I have to time it to be past the 10 days. And then there's another window that you had to hit. So it literally made it almost impossible for you to make an extra payment to get ahead. And I'm like, there's no way for these kids to get out from under this without it being absolutely crippling. And not to mention that the banks are sitting up booths, which I'm pretty sure that's probably where you got your credit card. Because I remember this being the case on my college, is they would set up a booth at all the fairs on the college campus and be like, hey, do you guys need a credit card? Hey, you want a credit card? We're giving them to anybody who wants one. Hey, you need a credit card, right? And because we're not giving them any financial education in high school, these kids are so ill-equipped to understand the long-term ramifications if they don't come from a family who really talked openly about finances. Do you feel like that's part of your experience of people that you're seeing?
100%. That is a very common experience, myself included. The fact that a large majority of students graduate without even knowing what their full bill is coming to, like that alone to me is signaling like, okay, this is predatory. They're like letting you sign these papers so easily when you're 18 years old, and not working you through like, what does this loan really mean?
Right.
not even the basics, like what could your monthly payment look like? That would really help some people make these conversations. So it's both like predatory on the way in because they're having these children make really big decisions, and then predatory on the way out because the interest is really ballooning for so many people. And um, yeah, it's really hard to get ahead of these payments, both because they have crazy things like you just described with extra payments going towards interest, but also like your payment's usually already quite high and you're at the beginning of your career and it feels like an extra like rent payment nearly. My student loan payment when I first graduated was 450. It was the second biggest payment I had out of everything. It was rent and then my student loan. And it's really hard to get ahead of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I was working at Verizon Wireless and our call center shut down and I got the chance to take a severance, or stay with the company. And I was like, give me that cash money because I was younger in my career. Plus, I had my MBA and I thought I would rather start over somewhere else. And I took my entire severance and I paid off an entire student loan. So I had two student loans, each around between 60 and 70,000. And my entire check, I just paid off half of it. So I was like, hey, this is so great. Everyone else is going on cruises and buying cars, but I paid off a student loan. But I still have almost $60,000 left because I'm not able to make anything other than just my payment. So although I'm able to do that, I still pay $430 every single month for my student loan, and on top of a mortgage and on top of a car payment, that in and of itself, without any other bills. And that makes it really, really hard to find strategies. Now working in a situation where I'm not making nearly as much money as I was, like every dime matters. Like it really truly is a difference of being able to pay a bill or not pay a bill. That can be really stressful. Is there something that you do, whether it be like a worksheet? I'm sure you do this in your one-on-one with your clients, but just where do people look to find that information to say, like, this is what I can do? And it might be small, but at least it's something to get myself out of this, you know?
Yes, yes. Yeah, in this case, like finding out what's happening in your finances, um, is like step one. And so, how to do that when I'm working with clients, I'll learn more about what works for them, what personality do they have, because suggesting you track everything in a spreadsheet sounds bonkers to some people and really enticing to some other people. And so my like step one of tracking is figuring out what works for you, and I have a handful of like suggestions for that. Like spreadsheets are an obvious choice, apps are another obvious choice, but usually they're the only two choices presented. Something as simple as putting a post-it note in your wallet and writing down every single time you spend, um, if that's what it's going to stick for tracking, I'm all for it. It doesn't have to be fancy. So there's that. There's having a second checking account. Like maybe you put, if you're only trying to spend $120 a week, putting $120 a week in a second checking account and then using that debit card. So there's a lot of different strategies to figuring out where your money's going. But the important thing is figuring out a strategy that works for you, that you can consistently do. Because finding $5, $10 in your budget really can make a really big difference.
So can you just tell us a little bit about one, where can people find you? So whether it be your website, Instagram, social, any of that, and what services that you offer and provide, just so people understand a little bit of what they can expect.
Yes, absolutely. You can find me at moneybeyondmath.com or on Instagram and TikTok at the same handle, Money Beyond Math. And my main service that I offer is one-on-one coaching. I see my clients twice a month and I give them the financial plan. It is a budget, a debt repayment plan, an investing plan, a savings plan, all of the things you want spelled out for your finances, and then ongoing coaching accountability. I tell people to expect 3 to 6 months of that coaching, though if you just want a financial plan and to call it a day, that's also an option. So there's no time obligation, but usually real change happens in those like 3 to 6 months.
Perfect. Is there any women that you have along the way been inspired by that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Yes, oh, so many. Definitely, definitely people in my own life. Like my mom is a entrepreneur at her own heart, and so seeing her change her entire life at like in her 40s was really inspiring, and I didn't realize how amazing that was until I was an adult. And then I have had a slew of amazing women teachers and mentors. And so honestly, I'm really blessed with the women that have been leading the way in my life.
Anyone else in the financial world, like women wise, that you like, whether it be
Oh, yes.
podcasts or anything that you're like, hey, this person's also a good person to follow?
Yes, definitely for me, a big one was Tori Dunlap. She is at her first 100K, and she's really transparent about what she's doing in her finances and how she's doing it. And that was super inspiring to me right at the beginning of when I was getting into personal finance.
Love it. Perfect. And then another question we just started recently asking people is if we stripped away all the titles. So Becca is not a financial advisor. She's not a mother, a student, a wife, a sister, a daughter. You stripped all those titles away. How would you describe Becca?
Yeah, great question.
To be your
I
own
would
unique
just,
self. Who are you?
I would describe myself as just truly like caring and um, a good friend and supportive person in a handful of people's lives.
Awesome. Love it. Perfect. Anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up today?
No, this was really, really fun. It was really great speaking to you guys about something I'm always excited to speak about. So it was really
Well,
fun.
we're excited. The work you're doing is great, and getting women comfortable in the financial world and helping them with, all of the things that are coming out of this crazy world that we live in, helping them navigate that. We appreciate all your hard work, and we always need good teachers on this planet. So thank you for all your work.
Totally.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
You'll be able to listen to this episode today on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, and YouTube, video and audio. And please make sure you subscribe on all platforms.
Yes, if this spoke to you guys, please share the episode, and we'll see you next week. Love you.
Thanks, everyone. Love you.